Bold predictions in August were so easy, weren't they? Because you just had to say things, and I just had to say things, and there was no consequence. But here's the thing about August. Every one of them that has ever occurred was eventually followed by a January. And in January, we find out who was right and who was wrong. And I asked you for bold predictions in August, and one of you just so thoroughly nailed it, you get to lead off the segment tonight. How about this one? Chris said Alabama will lose 2 regular season games, and neither of them will be Texas A&M. And well, then he said something not so nice about Nick Saban. This happened. 2 regular season losses. Neither of them were Texas A&M, although that game came down to the final play. That's the one Bryce Young didn't start. They lost to Tennessee. They lost to LSU by a combined 4 points. But the thing about it is, whether you lose by 4 or 400, as far as Chris is concerned, he was right. Up until this year, there were only 2 seasons for Alabama under Nick Saban after 07. We don't even count 07. That was the first year. So from 2008 through present day, there were only 2 other seasons where they had lost 2 or more regular season games. One of them was 2010, and the other one was 2019. And that was the year where they played Joe Burrow, and I think they lost to Auburn. That was the game where Tua was out, Mac Jones got the start. So it is rare for this to happen. And not only did it happen, Chris took the added step of saying, yeah, the rest of you don't know this, but A&M's going to kind of suck this year. So it's not even going to be them that beats Alabama. It's going to be folks that come from out of nowhere. Ding. Next up, let's go to the ACC. This was sort of doomed from the beginning. PJ said FSU will be this year's Baylor. They will win the ACC from Gainesville, Georgia, home of the Red Elephants. This didn't happen. I called this a 9 on the boldness scale, just too soon. Now, you want to say this about this upcoming year, we may even agree, but this past year, here's how far away it was. FSU lost to Clemson. They could have beat Clemson, and if the rest of the years played out respectively like they did, even with a head-to-head win, it wouldn't have mattered. FSU had 3 losses, but there you see them on the screen right now. NC State, Clemson, Wake Forest, they were 3 conference losses. So you take away the Clemson loss, turn it into a win, Clemson was still undefeated in conference play, so they still would have had the advantage on you. It was bold, and FSU won 10 games, and I got to be honest, if I knew FSU was going to win 10 games when this prediction came down, I would not have made it a 9 on the boldness scale. Be that as it may, close, but no cigar. Next up, a little playoff prediction here. Simon said, cracks knuckles, clears throat. Utah goes either undefeated or 12-1 and crashes the college football playoff. I believed in Utah. I had Utah in my playoff field. And I missed. And I made this an 8. I made the prediction an 8, even though I was making the prediction with him, because I knew my prediction was pretty bold. Utah voluntarily put themselves in a tough spot right out of the gate because they went to Florida. They didn't have to. And Florida has to go out there this next year, by the way, to open the season. But Utah lost to Florida. Classic game to open the season. They lost. And so they were already on thin ice with hot blades before week 2 even arrived. And I think they lost 3 games. As a matter of fact, Utah does not have a season with fewer than 2 losses since they've joined the Power 5 ranks, since they've been in the Pac-12. And they lost to Florida this year, UCLA, Oregon. Been a good program. It's just, people said when they were in the Mountain West and then they were going to join the Pac-12, they said, your days of being that G5 darling and being in the playoff picture every year are over. They were right. They haven't been there since. They haven't been in that picture since, and they've had some good years. Whittingham's one of the best coaches in the country. It just goes to show you how hard it is to maintain that level of consistency. And when you get benefit of the doubt as a P5 program and you don't as a G5 program, Utah's the classic example of why that kind of mentality exists. I have that mentality sometimes. Utah's why it exists. So this did not happen. No Utah in the playoff, yet still a pretty good year. Beat USC twice. Won the conference championship. No playoff, though. Next up, Penn State wins 10 plus games, and Sean Clifford is a big reason why. Yes, yes, yes. In Sean, I trusted at least. That makes one of us in this building. They lost to Michigan. They lost to Ohio State. And a lot of people predicted that at the beginning of the year. And when this prediction aired, I remember some of the comments saying, they're not going to be a 10-win team. They're not going to beat Michigan or Ohio State. And I sat there and I'm like, counting on both hands, like throwing up gang signs, trying to figure out, well, where are the other losses? Because this guy didn't say undefeated. He didn't say 11-1. He said 10-2. And you just chalked up 2 hypothetical losses. So far, all he is right. You got to find me more losses. And you didn't. In fact, the closest they came was that week 1 game against Purdue. And they snuck by Purdue. I remember being in a Fayetteville, Arkansas hotel room watching that game. I think it was a Friday night game. And they lost those 2 games. And I think one of the more impressive, underrated things we saw in the second half of college football 2022 was James Franklin seeing his team lose a lot of their preseason goals, and they just went right back to playing dominant football. Them and FSU down the stretch played very, very promising, dominant football. So this one did hit. They did win 10-plus games. The last one here did not come close. This one I gave a 9.5. Sean said, a defensive player will make it to New York for the Heisman, and it's not going to be Will Anderson. Well, Will Anderson did not make it as a Heisman Trophy finalist, and unlike last year, he didn't deserve to make it this year. Last year was just a royal screw job. Anyway, not only did Will Anderson not make it, no defensive player finished inside the top 10. Not necessarily because none of the defensive players in the country were among the 10 best. Never mind. You know my feelings on the Heisman Trophy voting process. So be that as it may, we had to bake that into the prediction. 9.5 was the boldness scale on that, and it did not hit.
Guys, thanks for watching Late Kick. Make sure and leave a comment. I love interacting with you. But most of all, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep all of this free.